Alright, now today we're going to be working on the carburetor on this motor. I already went through and I checked the compression, and then I checked, made sure it had spark, did the compression. So then we're going to pull off the carburetor and get it cleaned, and I'll show you how to do that, followed by the fuel lines next. So the first thing you're going to want to do is pop the air filter cover off. Behind that will be your air filter, and then behind that, or on the sides, will usually be 2 screws or bolts or nuts that hold your air filter on. So we'll remove those now. This one takes a 3/8. And then your kill switch is hooked to it right here. So we'll just move that down and out of the way. It doesn't really need to come out. It can though. We'll leave that hanging. Alright, now you have your throttle cable that's hooked to it. So you just push this down. It's your throttle. Before we do that, actually, we'll take off the fuel lines. Slide the carburetor off, and then you can get your throttle cable off. And that's all there is to it to take it off. We'll get this all cleaned up, and then put a new primer bulb in there, and I'll show you how to do that. Then after this, in the next video, we'll replace the fuel lines. Alright, now we're going to start pulling this apart. There's a little plastic piece that's over your high and low screw. That just pulls right off. And then we're going to take out the idler screw. We are going to take off, oh, before I get started, this top line right here, this goes from your primer into your tank, and this is the actual inlet. The bottom one is the actual inlet that goes to the carburetor from your gas tank. And that whole top piece should come off. We're going to put a new primer bulb in it, so we can just toss this one off to the side. You have 2 sets of gaskets here. One of them is like a cloth type gasket, not cloth, but very thin film like material, and then the other one is just a regular gasket. If I don't have to remove the gaskets, I won't. This thin one, I always take off and clean that. So we'll stick this off to the side. I'll keep this on even when I'm cleaning it. If I don't have to remove them, I won't, because if you can't help to not damage the gasket, then I don't remove it. So that's the top portion of it. It's pretty gummed up in there. So we'll take off the bottom portion. These usually ain't on very tight, so remember that when you put it back together. You don't have to really be cranking on it. This bottom diaphragm is going to have your fuel needle in it. Sometimes you have to use a razor blade just to kind of get under it and pry it apart. Be careful not to damage your gaskets. That's all it is. Now what I do is, if you grab these and go to pull them off, you're going to rip them. Don't do that. I'll take a razor blade and I'll get underneath of them and just break it loose from the body. This one's coming apart pretty easy. Because a lot of the times you can reuse these gaskets. I've never had to order a kit yet where I had to replace these. That came right off. You're going to want to hold it up to the light and see if there's any holes in it. Which I see none in this. It's seems a little on the stiff side, but I'm going to reuse it and see if I can get away with that. Right here is your, right under here is your needle jet. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a spring that pushes up on this. When you push down, it lifts that needle so fuel can go through. Maybe next year I'll get a better camera. This one doesn't have auto focus. So you're going to want to unscrew this one right here. And keep your thumb over this, because there's little parts in here that will come flying out. We have our needle jet. Or if you want to call it a float, you can. Our regular screw. Our little tiny spring. And then the arm assembly for that needle jet. So now what we're going to do is remove the highs and the high and the low. This one has these special caps on it that are kind of hard to adjust. Now, if you don't have these on here and you got the regular wrench, screw each one in and count how many times you screw it in. Because when you put it together, you're going to want to screw it in, seat it the entire way, and then unscrew it that many times so you know where you're at. These should come right off. And I usually toss these out. Should come right off. They don't always. Alright, let me get the pliers and get these off, and then I'll show you. Okay, with these, you guys seen the plastic pieces are on there? I actually had to Dremel them off. Usually, a lot of the times they pull off. They stick them on here so the user can only adjust it a certain amount of the way, and it basically almost makes the carb inserviceable, if that makes any sense, because you can't get the high and low screws out. So this one on this side is your high, this one's your low. So what I do is turn it until it stops and count the turns. So we have a half a turn, 1, and like 1 1/8. So a little over 1 turn on the low screw. So we'll take that out. That pulls out with the spring and everything. And then we're going to do the same thing to the high. So the low is 1 turn out from closed. This one is half a turn. Little over 3/4 turn out from closed, which is about normal. Now when taking these out, sometimes you want to keep them separate from each other, but usually the high and the low screws are different sizes in length. And sometimes they're not. This one's your low, this one's your high. The high is shorter, and then your low screw's longer. So jot that down on your phone or write it on a piece of paper. Then what I'll do is I'll take some Croil. I like this stuff. You can use PB Blaster or WD-40 if you choose to. But I like to take this and I will spray it in each hole and make sure that it comes out somewhere else. So, and I'll do that to every single hole on this carburetor, including these. I done a video a while back where I did a different carburetor, and I'm pretty sure I showed this on it, where you'd spray it in this hole and then it would come out here. I don't do this in my workshop. I take this outside to do it. So we're going to get this all sprayed down. Make sure all the holes are cleaned out. Don't forget to spray inside your high and your low. So we're going to do that, and then we'll be back and I'll show you how it cleans up in the ultrasonic cleaner. Alright, now that we got everything sprayed down with that Croil, we're just going to go ahead and drop everything in. This is just pretty much an aluminum block left over. Everything else has been stripped off of it. So we're going to toss it in there. Everything. Everything goes in it. Filter. Not your filter, you know what the hell I mean. All your gaskets, springs, high jet, low jet, the needle, the arm for the needle, screws. This is the only thing I don't really clean is the spring. We'll just set that off to the side because it can get lost in there easy once it's filthy. Other spring, your little filter. And also hold that up to the light to make sure you can see through it. Alright. Oh, don't forget your little end piece. And then we'll turn it on. I usually put this on the highest setting, which is 480 seconds. And then we'll turn it on, and what I'll do is when it gets halfway through, I'll kind of stir everything up and flip everything over so it gets both sides pretty well. And I'm not going to have you sit here and watch the whole thing. You can obviously see that it's cleaning everything out. So, like I said, about halfway through I'll flip everything over and then clean it that way. Alright, we have everything all cleaned up in the ultrasonic cleaner. I took it out and blew it off with the air compressor. It's a lot cleaner than it was. So, we're going to start putting it back together. The first thing I'm going to start with is the needle jet and the spring and everything. I'm not going to videotape this part. I done a last video where I did an installation of this, and there's 100,000 other videos on YouTube if you want to know how to do that. I'm just running low on battery and don't feel like fighting with it in front of the camera, so. Okay, now that that's in, when you're done, you're going to want to push down on this arm to make sure that the needle moves. The next we're going to put in is your high and low needle. So you're going to want to take these, put the springs on them, just so it keeps tension on them. Okay, so we wrote down that your low is longer than your high, so you're going to want to get that right. You'll see an L and an H right here. So start screwing it in the whole way until it seats. Don't force these because you can break this and then you're out of a carburetor. Alright, it's snug. It's the entire way in. So we're going to do a little over one turn out. So we have half, one, and just a little further. Now we're ready to put the high in. Alright, so we're going to back it out. One, half, and a little bit before the one right there. Now we're going to take this and put, this side's always going to face down. So we're going to set it on there. Put that cap on there. And then we're going to put in our 4 screws. Just start them all by hand so you know that it's even. Okay, that side's done. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put this screen back in. And you're going to want to hold this up to the light to make sure you can see through it. And I can. So we're going to put this back in this hole. And you can take another screw head and push it down until it's seated. Alright, now what we're going to do is we're going to put this on. It's the wrong way. We're going to set this in just like that, and then put it back on. This gets kind of tricky. You're going to want to line up the pegs with these holes. And we're on. So now we're just going to set this down here. We're going to take our new primer bulb and just put it through that hole like that. And then we're going to reinstall this. And then screw it on. And then you're going to want to pump that to make sure that there's air coming out of this top one. And I can completely hear it. Then the next thing we're going to do is put in your idling adjustment. And then screw it in, but not too far because we'll have to fine tune this later. And that's all there is for cleaning. Installation is reverse of the way you took it off. So I'm not going to bore you with that. But there you go. That's done.